Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back to the Junius Maltby channel. Thanks for joining us and being here, being part of the conversation. I've kind of had to chain myself to the seat right now because I'm probably going to get a little worked up, so bear with me. Some of you have been on the channel before when I was in kind of a mood. And I read an article after perusing the headlines and going through some news this morning. And there's one in particular that's going to probably set a lot of you guys off. And it should generate some good conversation on here. And it's the article that's going to come up towards the middle or the end of the video by Paul Krugman, the renowned economist. Yes, the very Paul Krugman that stated we should lie to the public and state that there is an alien invasion so that it would generate enough stimulus spending to turn the economy around. Yes, he did say that. You can look it up. That was a joke or an idea that he did have as a good, devout Keynesian that he is. So let's get to some news real quick. Yeah, the Fed, they're not going to raise rates. Most of us probably realized that was going to happen. Why? Because they can't, because America is a debtor nation. Most Western countries are so buried under the burdens of debt that to raise interest rates would only cause problems, economic problems to worsen, and overall just collapse our economies under the weight of such debt. We can't afford it. We can't pay the interest on the debt we have, and so 0% and fractions of zeros of percent is all that we can ever really hope to be able to afford. So what did that do? Well, because interest rates weren't going to go up, that little information kind of rippled across the pond of the economy and affected all different sectors. Gold, silver, copper, all you can see there went up a little bit. Gold's doing pretty well. It's apparently one of the best months it's had for a while. Gold rallies after the Fed says cautious on U.S. interest rates. They're just not going to do anything. And I think we've expected this. We've talked about it. And so gold surged 2%. Gold rallies after Fed says cautious on U.S. economic growth. So they're cautious on economic growth. The nice, careful word, that's a cautious word. To use the word cautious in a headline or a statement by the Fed is a very cautious type of behavior. 10-year Treasury notes tumbled. Dollar took a little bit of a dip, but we'll get to that. Apparently that's a good thing. That's good news. You want to have weak currencies, right? Gold prices surged more than 2% on Wednesday, on track for the biggest rally since January after the Federal Reserve signaled a more cautious outlook for U.S. economic growth, and the dollar tumbled. All right, decline in the U.S. dollar lifts oil and stocks. Yeah, well, because why? Well, they are valued in dollars, so the dollar gets weaker, then all of those things that are pegged at the dollar or tied to it will increase in value because it takes more dollars now to purchase the same amount. Pretty basic economics there. A weaker dollar takes more of them to buy the same amount of goods that it required to buy when it was stronger. Strong dollar forces the Fed to rethink its next move. So if you guys are out there in dollar, you guys, this is all stuff that's going to have effects not only today or tomorrow, but several years from now. So this is good stuff to pay attention to. But what we really want to get into is, I just set the stage there with those first couple of slides to generate the conversation. Now, I know a lot of you out there that are part of the Junius Maltby channel are very wise and esteemed viewers that understand some of the basic principles of economics, monetary history. We've gone over so many videos on here, and I posted a couple today just to kind of remind some people of where we've been, what we've talked about. And well, here's a headline: stronger U.S. dollar is actually a weakness. Paul Krugman. This is why I'm chained to the chair, guys, because I don't want to punch the computer or throw the recording device that's recording the audio for this. Very few personalities in the news get me as worked up as Paul Krugman. I mean, you look at the guy with his little prophet beard and the little facial expressions that he makes, but then you look at the way the media puts him on this pedestal, and they kind of ignore a lot of the more, I would say, more rational, more intelligent, more articulate economic figures that are economist figures that exist out there that offer their opinions. And remember, we've covered this in a video just recently, that economics is not a hard science, and it's not necessarily really a lot of facts. Typically, it's a lot of opinions and interpretations and theory. It's not a science, and it's actually a lot simpler than it's made out to be by these people who pretend that they are basically these interpreters of symbols. It's almost like Paul Krugman believes he's a prophet who has to interpret for us, the lay people, the knaves, the peasants, the plebes. He goes up on Mount Olympus and consults with Zeus, and then comes down and talks to us, and carries tablets, and then interprets to us his almighty wisdom and what has been bestowed upon him as the truth. Well, again, leave it to Paul Krugman to interpret something in a bizarre and crazy way that defies most logic. Let's just read through some of it. There's no way I could put the whole article up here, because I would probably go unconscious in a fit of rage if I tried to read through the whole thing for all of you and cover every point by point. So if you want to go read the whole article and pick it apart, and go for it. I took enough of it. Let's just read through. We've been warned over and over that the Federal Reserve, in its effort to improve the economy, is debasing the dollar. The archaic word itself tells you a lot about where the people issuing such warnings are coming from. It's an allusion to the ancient practice of replacing pure gold or silver coins with, quote, debased coins, in which the precious metal content was adulterated with cheaper stuff. Message to the gold bugs and Ayn Rand disciples. He's talking to you and to me and those of us on the channel, guys, who dominate the Republican Party. That's not how modern money works. Still, the Fed's critics keep insisting that easy money policies will lead to a plunging dollar. We're going to stop there, pick it apart a little bit. We're going to do this like we kind of did that gold is worthless video last month. Well, we're not Republican Party, most of us. I'm not. I am, as you all know, a political atheist. I don't belong to either party. I like to look at individual policies, individual laws. I don't believe that either party has an answer. I think they're both corrupt and in collusion with each other to basically take control and destroy and empower themselves and stuff their pockets. Okay, now he says that it's an allusion to the ancient practice of replacing pure gold or basically debasing money is an ancient practice is what he's saying. It's not. Can he point out to me on a timeline when governments stopped debasing money in order to stuff their pockets and make and use the inflation tax as a way of stealing from the people? It still happens today. It's the same practice that occurred 1,000 years ago. It's been going on since the beginning of time. And there's a lot of hypocrisy we're going to have to trudge through here, but oh man, it's going to be hard to even find a beginning and an end, especially doing this extemporaneously without a script or anything. But that's not how modern money works. Well, Paul Krugman, please tell us how modern money works then. And here's another thing. I'm just going to say it now before I forget. If a weak dollar is good and a strong dollar is bad, how weak do we go? Is the $100 trillion Zimbabwe note, because that's about as weak as a currency as the world has ever seen. So according to Paul Krugman's logic, the healthiest economy would have been the Zimbabwe economy with the $100 trillion note, because those people took debasing a currency, well, to the 100 trillionth degree. They went about as far as any country or any nation or banking system has ever gone when it came to absolutely destroying a currency. So according to Krugman's logic, Zimbabwe had a better economic model and had more wisdom and enlightenment by destroying their currency, Well, they could export more goods. I guess maybe they exported a lot of goats and dirt and I don't know, some other things that they might manufacture there in Zimbabwe. But let's continue on. Reality, however, keeps declining to oblige. Far from heading downstairs to debasement, the dollar has soared through the roof. Over the past year, it has risen 20% on average against other major currencies. It's up 27% against the euro. Hooray for the strong dollar. Well, we all know the dollar is the leper with the most fingers left. And comparing the dollar to all of these other currencies that are in the middle of a currency war and trying to debase their currencies as fast as they possibly can in order to export goods, that's like walking into an AIDS hospital where everyone's dying of AIDS, and you find one guy who's dying of hepatitis C, and you say that, look how this guy's the healthiest guy in here. This guy's healthy. He doesn't have AIDS. Well, he still has an illness, and he's still dying. Just because the dollar doesn't have the same illnesses that the other currencies have does not mean it's a healthy currency. And just because it hasn't dropped and plummeted to absolute debasement yet doesn't mean that it won't. A lot of the things that he's saying may not have even happened yet, but they may, and they very likely will in the future. The dollar has a couple things going for it that other currencies don't. And there's, of course, the fact that it's the world reserve currency, that it's the petrodollar, that all oil transactions are transacted using the dollar, that in order, according to Bretton Woods and other agreements, currency agreements around the globe, the dollar, being the world reserve currency, has to be purchased by other nations in order to issue or print their own currencies. There is a monopoly here, and a control and a grip on the world economy by those that issue the US dollar that nobody else has. The dollar and those who control it basically have the reins of power over other world economies and other currencies. That's why the dollar is stronger, and also, while everyone's racing to the bottom and debasing their currencies, investors and global financiers are jumping into the dollar for safety and security because they see it as the stronger currency right now, which, as the stampede of investors and people who are buying dollars run towards it constantly because the other currencies are losing value, well, that's obviously going to drive the dollar and demand for the dollar up. Okay, let's just keep going here. Or not. Actually, the strong dollar is bad for America. Is it bad for America or bad for Americans? Because sometimes what's good for an American is not really necessarily the best for America. Having a strong dollar might be good for you. You're buying gas on the cheap. We're able to purchase goods from other countries on the cheap. Sure, there's some debate here with Paul Krugman, but let's keep going here. In an immediate sense, it will weaken our long-delayed economic recovery by widening the trade deficit. Well, we don't make anything, Paul, and we don't make a whole lot of things anymore. In a deeper sense, the message from the dollar's surge is that we're less insulated than many thought from problems overseas. In particular, you should think of the strong dollar, weak euro combination as the way Europe exports its troubles to the rest of the world. Okay. Is there a policy, this is the end of the article, I'll skip the rest of it. Is there a policy, moral to all of this? One thing is that it's really important for all of us that Mario Draghi at the European Central Bank and associates succeed in steering Europe away from a deflationary trap. The euro is their currency, but it turns out to be our problem. Mainly, though, this is another reason for the Fed to fight the urge to pretend that the crisis is over. Don't raise rates until you see the whites of inflation's eyes. Those last two sentences, I think, speak volumes. Another reason for the Fed to fight the urge to pretend the crisis is over. So he's saying the Fed is pretending that the crisis is over, which means it's not. So Krugman just said that the crisis, whether he's speaking about the European crisis, which is part of the global economic crisis we had just been through, he's saying it was never over, which I would agree with. It's not. But he says, don't raise rates until you see the whites of inflation's eyes. What is he basing that on? Could it be, why would you want to wait until you see the whites of inflation's eyes to do something? Couldn't it be that it has the momentum of a freight train, and by the time you saw it, it could be too late? And by the time these global puppet masters and marionette controllers who can have the strings over all these charts, graphs, and inflation, by the time they started to take action, isn't it possible that it would be too late and that inflation would run off the tracks and get out of control and drive the price of goods and services up? I just find it interesting that we have to live our lives in accordance with the decisions of these unelected policymakers and these central bankers and these bearded wonders such as Paul Krugman. You know, a guy that has likely never held a job in his life or operated or worked in the private sector, bought or sold or produced any goods and services or provided anything to anybody for anything other than wearing a suit and going to class and talking about theories and sitting amongst other students and peers and chalkboards and desks. I don't know, maybe he breathed in too much chalk dust or ate paint chips as a child. But maybe he grew up near a factory downwind, breathing in mercury vapor. You know, I don't find Paul Krugman's logic to be on track. And it's very interesting because there are so many economists that disagree with him that are far more logical and articulate. Now, I understand that he's worshipped now, and there might be some Paul Krugman fans that are going to stop by this channel to lambaste us and preach to us in their mighty zealotry, because you will find that they are very religious when it comes to their views of the state, of Paul Krugman, of central banking, of the Keynesian economic system and school of thought. They're a lot like Muslims in their religious zealotry. They are very devout. They are what you would call economic fundamentalists, or Keynesian fundamentalists. Anyways, we're going to leave this here. I'm going to drop this video on here, the news. You know, it's a little bit of news, a little bit of opinion. A little bit too fired up to break it down too much more today. But, yeah, we've talked about Paul Krugman on this channel before. You guys know my feelings on him. And apparently, having a strong currency is bad. Having a weak currency is better. And we're just going to close with the thought, with the premise that if that was true the entire time during the Industrial Revolution and during the last century, the beginning from, let's just say, from about 1880 to about 1950. Yes, the tail end there, 1933 to 1950, we would have been under a non-gold standard here in the United States. But from about 1880 to 1950, let's call that a great period of industrial growth and expansion. You know, during the beginning and the middle of the Industrial Revolution especially, there was some rapid growth in industrial development here in the United States, and we had one of the strongest currencies in the world. So I just find it very interesting that he believes we would have been much better off back then if we had one of the weakest currencies. Perhaps if we had a currency similar to the Weimar currency of Germany at the time. How strong would America have been if in the 1920s we experienced Weimar-type inflation, which according to Paul Krugman is not a bad thing to debase a currency to that extent. It's a good thing. So, I don't know. A lot of illogic there. Again, hope you guys can bust in some comments, get some words out, and join me in the conversation here and articulate your thoughts a little bit better on what your feelings are. What are your thoughts on Paul Krugman, on his theories, on this article, and, well, the Fed decision to maybe not raise interest rates? All right. Thanks for being part of the Junius Maltby channel. Have a great day.